my early days in coaching were not something that I'd pre-planned. I was lucky to have a decent career playing, but I played most of my career as a professional, but on a part-time basis. When my career was coming to an end, I was then very fortunate that I got a leg up because the academy systems were starting in Scotland, and I entered Motherwell 2000, 2001, when really they had three teams that were dual-banded age groups, 13s, 15s, 17s. And just through working with young kids in the academy, I got a real, hunger for developing myself, and therefore getting myself accredited and looking at what qualifications I could achieve to help young players on their pathway was something that really appealed to me. And that snowballed from then, and it went from part-time with the dual banded age group to managing the 17s, to managing the 19s, to then becoming the academy director, to become first team manager. From there, just for the love of the area I was involved in, I kind of developed a skill set for the transition between young players from the academy to the first team. As a result of that, I then became headhunted and I went to Sheffield United. From there, everything just snowballed because the magnitude the area I was working in was so much greater than Scotland. I did most of the things in Scotland that I'd wanted to do. Was very lucky to have good young players. I was lucky to have a club that supported my ideas. But when I went to England, there was 5 guys doing the job I used to do in Scotland. So that kind of gives you an idea of the magnitude of the academies in the UK. But as a result of that, that took me travelling because Sheffield United's role was that of an international academy director. And that took me to China, to India, America, and then all the European countries, as well as going as far as Taiwan. And all I was doing was developing myself. And I wasn't dropping in one size fits all to every club I went to. What I was doing was I was embracing the culture. And with my experience that I was gaining daily, I was then, when I looked at the curriculum I was delivering, I was being able to provide a better service than I did when I started off. And that really set me in, fantastic steading for where my career would go from then. And incrementally, that led me back to Dundee United, where I became assistant manager or assistant head coach. I then went to East Fife, and at the time, I wasn't really sure what job I wanted to do. Because I had been all of these roles, I had been first team coach, I had been assistant manager, I'd been caretaker manager, I'd been academy director. But that kind of gives you the idea what I would say to young coaches. If you've got a McDonald's franchise, you might have the money to buy it, but they don't give you the keys until you can flip the burgers, you can order the stock, you can sweep the floor. And that's what I was doing. I was learning how to do all of these things, and I was becoming what I think more rounded in my approach. That led me to America, which we can talk on at greater details.
Yeah,
I came back because I was a bit concerned that I was too young to detach myself from mainstream European football. Whether that was right or wrong is up for debate, but it's something I don't regret. And I came back to Scotland as a manager at Falkirk. I then went to be assistant manager in the Latvian national team. That itself opened up a wonderful experience to go and be head coach at a Latvian Premier League team, FK Liepāja. Very lucky to manage them to a European spot, which they'd never had in their history. And again, it was finding out from different people, working with different types of players, working with a different mentality, but at the same time embracing the culture. Eventually leave there, come back home with 3 fantastic years at Cove Rangers, where we inherited a team because of the new pathway in European football, a team that had managed to get from a regional league to the national league, and we had three championship wins in a row, which they're now sitting in the second league in Scotland, which is fantastic. Great achievement. Then go to Hartlepool United. Don't have such a good spell there, but that kind of sums up what I've told you in 4 minutes is 20 years of doing various jobs in football and being involved in professional football, which is something that I'm greatly appreciative of.
Yeah, and going back, obviously, me and you have a personal relationship, so Is it Dundee United? You've got the winningest record as a head coach.
No, at Motherwell, I'm the worst statistical manager, which is my club.
I've made you look bad there.
And perversely, at Dundee United, I'm the best coach in their history using the same matrix. But that's how people can skew data. Yeah. And how you can actually make yourself the best, or can condemn yourself to be the worst.
It's a big Sam at England, right? 100% win rate, one game.
Well, that's what I was like at Dundee United. Never lost, and Motherwell never won. And it's when you drill into these things and you say that's why that happened, or that's why that happened. But what I say to young coaches and young players, the people that you come across, take some gems from. You can't absorb everything everybody tells you, because it doesn't fit. If you've got a rucksack and you're looking to put things that are valuable in it, don't let it get weighed down with stuff that you don't need. And as you get on your career as a footballer and as a coach, you then make sure that rucksack is your personal belonging, that's your integrity about how you want to do the job.
Yep. Yeah, and going back to kind of summarising your career in 4 minutes, I see the book behind you that I've read. So if anyone wants to get a copy of that, we can. Gordon Young, Licensed to Skill, and you'll be able to read a little bit more detail about everything.
Well, I think everybody's got a book in them, Darren. And I look at what you've achieved in your short spell, from helping you get to America, because you had the desire to go there and have the independence to survive. Everybody's got a story they can tell. And it was just down to the pandemic and the downtime that I was able to put my memoirs onto a page. But it wasn't that difficult, because all you were doing was reliving, as I say, these stories that you would hear me telling in the pub or telling in your house, having a beer, watching the football. And that's what was so fascinating about. Actually, in 3 months, I recalled 20 years of traveling, which has just gone like that.
Yeah, no, I read it, obviously. Peter sent me over a copy, and some of the stories are brilliant. So anyone wants to buy it, go ahead, get a copy. So just to touch on, you mentioned again in that 4 minute summary, your time in the US coaching. So obviously, elite athlete, we help players come over here to the US on scholarships. So can you get into a little bit of detail on your time in the US, the lifestyle? Obviously, you were out in California, so doesn't get much better than that if you want to go into a little bit more detail.
No, it doesn't, and I'm truly appreciative. I got a call from a guy. I'd been going out to the States about 6-7 years in the summer, and I was doing clinics, and I was doing symposiums, and I was doing a lot of coach education, and I built up a good network. So therefore, when I was after the Dundee United thing, I needed to kind of reset myself, and I could contact David Robertson, who's the executive director for Davis Legacy in California. He said, why don't you come out here? And his was the club that, and I still do, I'm technical advisor to, and I help their coaches, hopefully get the best out themselves. And I, repeating what I said earlier, it's not me being dictatorial and saying, this is what you must do. It's me saying, this is what worked for me. This is what I get some success. If you think you can replicate it and add to it, then great. But the offer to go there, what was fantastic, and I spent 14 months there. My golf really improved.
You need to come visit me here.
Well, this is what I think a lot of young athletes, as you mentioned earlier, there's an opportunity to go and get your education. There's an opportunity to develop as a footballer or as an athlete, whatever field you're operating. And I'm saying, tongue in cheek about the golf, but I had 14 months where every week I would have a coaches meeting, and I would deliver in the coaches meeting seminars that I had in my pro license. Yep. Because that I thought was the information that these guys needed to make themselves better coaches. So rather than going to coach education, which is maybe mandatory once a year or whatever, I was working with these guys on a daily basis and challenging them on a weekly basis. I was dissecting their training sessions and looking at their matches, and able to offer insight and an angle that could make them better, which ultimately makes the player better. And what you've got in the States that we don't have back home is you've really got the facilities. And most of the states that I've been involved in have got the facilities, and because they've got the pathway to the collegiate system, it offers a fantastic opportunity. If you're somebody who wants to challenge yourself away from home, and if you want to challenge yourself in an environment that will give you, 5 sessions a week on your, we're talking about soccer here.
Yep.
Your games program in the spring and in the fall are completely different, but you're entering into a process that lets you do what you wanted to do as a wee boy. You want to be a full-time player.
Yeah.
And but the supplementary factor that the States offer is you've got a degree at the end of it. And the two of them work hand in hand. As you know, that my son, he spent 4 years just like yourself, and I'm going to pick him up from the airport in a couple of hours' time, and he's just come back from London where he met up with 14 guys that he played with.
Yeah.
And that's fantastic. Now, I still keep in touch with guys I played with and in my networking coaching, but the guys that you've played with and that he was down there in London and meeting, I've came from about 6 different countries.
Yeah.
And that makes you more rounded as well. So it's a wonderful opportunity. I'm not saying it. If some people are a home bird, some people like the idea of trying to be a professional in their home country. But I think if you just do the maths and look at the size of Scotland and the size of the USA, you only need to look at Arizona where you're based, or California where I was based, or South Carolina where Robbie was based. It's the magnitude of the opportunity that's greater than what's back home.
Yeah. And going back to it, I was thinking when you were talking there, going back to that network, I had boys from Brazil, Holland, England. So yeah, when you're getting this professional environment to play and train every day, and you're backing up with a degree, so if that full-time offer doesn't come around, you have a network where you can maybe, go work in Europe or even go vacation in Brazil. It's totally different to what you would get if, you played with a part-time club in Scotland or a boys' club in Scotland. Obviously, I was at Alloa before I came out here, and to go from that small community in Alloa to mid-Missouri with boys from, probably 12 different nationalities was just unbelievable.
It's fantastic, but also I bet your culinary skills are better than when you left, because when you get pot noodles when you were back in Motherwell, now I'm sure you can sit down and make Courtney a meal, but as a result of what you've achieved, having to live on your own and having to survive on your own, completely different. I was brought up, you're in football, you go in and you get your breakfast, you get your lunch. When you go abroad, your passport's handed over, everything is done for you. Whereas you've got to make sure that your grades are good. You've got to make sure that your accommodation has been kept up to scratch. You've got to make sure that you're performing on the field, and the level of the performance is determined by the schedule. So in the fall season you can be playing 2 games a week for 3 months. So you've got to be robust, and it's just that opportunity. If people think they're going there just to have a holiday, then it's not the right thing. It's dedication. There's a lot of hard work, and there'll be times I used to feel sorry for myself some Sunday evenings because of the time difference, when I was busy at the club, when I was playing, and even my days off if I was golfing. I had a great time. But if I was on my own, say like on a Sunday afternoon, and nothing to do with an 8-hour time difference, I used to think about my mates back home, obviously my family before that, and I couldn't really contact them because it was the middle of the night.
Yeah.
So you've got to understand that, that when you make that commitment. But there's just so many opportunities. When I recall there, when you asked me to relay the places that I've coached, the clubs that I've been with, the magnitude of the clubs I've been with, and yet probably the best time I've had was in America.
Yeah.
And that was a result of the facilities. It was a result of kidding aside, the climate in California was wonderful. But you don't have to be in California. You can be in any of the 50 states. And as long as you're in the right, if you're pigeoned in the right hole, then you've got a chance to develop. If you are sold a dream and you end up in a D4 school, which is, beyond below what you should be playing at, and you're a hick for the sticks, and there's 1 5 and dime and there's nothing else. You're struggling. But at the same time, if you think you're going to live in Manhattan and play football, it's all, what I'm trying to get across is it's about the realism.
Yep.
But
that's one of your big things. We sit down with a family before we start recruiting coaches and sending players to certain schools, and we say, what are you looking for? Do we think you can achieve this? We try to be as upfront and honest right from the get-go, because there's a lot of kids who see these big Division 1 schools and think, oh, I'm going to go play there, but that's a really high level. You got some of those boys who are going and training with Manchester City during the summer and these big English Premier League clubs. So that is our main thing. Can we be open, honest, and upfront right from the get-go?
Well, that's important. And I always go back to experiences, whether it be with yourself or other young players. But when it's my son I'm looking after, I can speak from experience about the things that you're rightly paying attention to, because his mum has, while I'm travelling here and travelling there and being in football and saying, get up, don't lie down, never show you're weak. All of these things, at the end of the day, his mother, like your mother, is looking where he's staying.
Yeah.
How's he doing? You're watching your games live, which is fantastic. But it's having the assurance that he has been well looked after and he's actually in the right place. Because you don't have to be, 6,000 miles from home to be homesick.
No.
You can be homesick, 2 hours away. It's important that, you do what it says in the tin. And I think through your experience as an elite athlete going there, I think that gives you a great opportunity to pass on. And also, there'll be things that you experienced to say, well, I could improve on that. That's back to the rucksack again.
Yeah.
You put in what you think's relevant. There's a lot of things that you say, oh, I didn't particularly like that, or that wasn't really what I signed up for. So now that you've lived that experience, you can then customize it to what you think is the right package for a potential athlete to go. I remember Robbie, he knocked back a contract here in Scotland because he wanted to go to America. Our next door neighbour, Nicky Patterson, he'd gone like 10 years before that. He went to UC Vegas, I think he was in, and he ended up playing with Charleston Battery. He ended up playing with Indy 11. He played in Ontario. And probably very much similar to yourself, Robbie came back because of the pandemic, when all of the athletes had to come home, and he was a month short his graduation. We never got the chance to go out and to see where he lived, although he used to come and visit me when I was in the States, because we had a crossover.
Yeah.
But I don't think he'd have came home if bar the global
pandemic
circumstances. Exactly.
Yeah. So we spoke about Robbie a little bit. If you don't mind, we could go into a little bit more detail on, your whole process of him coming out. Obviously, he started in Colorado and then transferred to South Carolina. So he has a unique experience in that as well. So why don't we touch on Robbie a little bit and kind of his process?
Okay. So not too dissimilar to yourself, because you're both with professional clubs in Scotland. You're making a career decision. You're coming to that period in your life where your school's coming to an end. You're chasing the dream. And at that point, you're thinking, have I got the tools and have I got the exposure to go and be a top player? And this is the things I used to speak to Robbie about on my own experience. I remember having to make the same decision at 20, 21. Am I going to really be at the top? And I didn't think I was at the time. So you then have to think, that's why I said, for me to play 600-700 games as a professional on a part-time basis, was a great achievement for me. But Robbie looked at these type of things and thought he'd listened a lot to Nicky next door, who'd had a great time, but he wasn't selling him the everything's a piece of cake. He would be able to be very realistic, and when he came back home and talk about his experiences. And sometimes when you meet people in your life, it kind of either drives you or interests you. And Robbie decided that he wouldn't take the full-time contract, because then he wouldn't be applicable for the NCAA. He'd have spent a year as a professional. That's another thing which is really important for kids. So when they're becoming 16 and the club says, we're taking on 20 apprentices, even if you're getting paid 150 sterling, you're still deemed as a professional. And Robbie was clever enough, not by my driving, but his understanding, that he would play as an amateur for another year with another club and explore the opportunities to go out to America. So we did that. We spoke to one or two companies. We're going back 6-7 years ago, and there was only 1 or 2 games in town, and they had a kind of monopoly. Whereas now it's so reassuring to know that you're getting people now that have had an experience very, very, very recently, and are in a position now to show what a better pathway it can be. So all of that cut aside, with 1 or 2 people we spoke with, he actually went out because of my contacts. I was out in my summer symposium program, and he came out to visit, and I took, we went as a family, and Robbie went and trialled with UC Davis.
UC Davis, right?
Yeah. UC Davis, a top club, top university.
Division 1 school, yeah.
Very good, very high standard. And he did particularly well. So much so that when I came home, he stayed out on his own because he was determined, and he wanted to see what was on offer. That type of school and that type of organisation could have a few Robbie Youngs, and they were prepared to offer him about 60% funding. But it still left us short a really chunk of money, and this is where the understanding of the process is important. This was a big chunk of money. They were. I don't think they'd ever given many people as much because of the status that they were as a university,
especially an international student as well.
Correct. So that was very. It showed me that, and it also showed him that there was something there. And it was a bit parochial because he'd been in the Davis area a few times, and we had friends there, and he was thinking it was like, that this is the be all and end all, but it wasn't. The numbers didn't stack up, and at the same time, some offers came in from 1 or 2 other people, and the one that he liked best was Fort Lewis, which was in Colorado.
Durango, right?
So he was. The fact that they had made such a play for him, and I always remember when they spoke with him, just like you and I are speaking just now. They're in the
I think I know where you're going with this one.
They're in the coach's office.
Yeah.
And they've got a shirt at the back with 9 on it, with Young.
Yeah.
And that was the sales pitch that turned it, because he was speaking to other people, and it just showed that commitment.
Yeah. The coach is going that extra step, so when he comes out to America, it's going to be, he can then rely on that coach. He knows that coach has his best interest at heart. I always remember that story when I was going through the process. We spoke about it. Well,
you remember the interviews that we had with your suitors as well.
Yeah.
And while I sat behind you and prompted you the things that the experience that I had gone through, and then Robbie had gone through, you were in a much stronger position to ask the questions. So now that you've got a company that's going to transit elite athletes to America, they're going with the understanding that you've already did the spade work.
Yeah.
So the type of questions that I would ask and you asked in the day, you will be able to answer before they're asked, because you've provided that information. And that's so important. So when he got out there, even just sending them the videos of the locker rooms, sending them the facilities, telling them the cross-pollination and international players that were there, That all whetted his appetite and just was absolutely desperate to get there. After a year, he's probably outlived it a bit because he probably was a wee bit better than the standard.
Yeah.
But the fact that they'd made such a big pitch towards him, he could easily have stayed there and maybe stagnated as a player. Certainly not as a student because his grades were hitting the marks. But he decided to go and explore, was there something else that would go and challenge him, get him up a division? And he was so fortunate that he became, the next step would have been an All-American, but the levels before that, he's getting selected for the league team. He's been awarded these merits because of his contribution to the team and to a striker, his goal scoring ability. But his time in South Carolina, he moved out the dorms, went into an apartment, shared with guys from like 3-4 different countries. It brought him on as a person. And even when I look at him today, how he conducts himself a lot more mature than that he should at his age. Not that he sounds like an old man, but he's lived that. He's lived on his own. He's cooked on his own. He's got a job in the university. All of these things that all supplement what you guys did. I see a totally different person now. Whether he came back or not, the fact that he had to come back, he's then in a position where the degree that he's got, there's not a lot of opportunities in the UK. So he had to look at something that was transferable. And the fact that you've got your degree means that a lot of businesses and a lot of organisations, they're not too hung up in the fact that, you've studied rocket science. What they're after is the fact that for 4 years, you've been able to be disciplined, organised, studious, and have the ability to take on information. So that's a transferable skill.
Especially in a completely different country, different culture, different environment. So, if Robbie goes to apply for a job, which I know he has one right now, but even having that experience, living, working in a completely different environment, that speaks volumes for applying for jobs back in the UK.
Well, I do see and I'm very lucky. My 2 kids, I've been fortunate to travel. They've travelled through education, travelled through sport, they've travelled through, just vacation. But they've had the ability to circumnavigate the world. And between us, I told a story in the book that one year Jenna got me a map of the world, and it was in foil, and you had to scrape off the country you've been at.
Yeah.
I was up to my knees in foil at the end.
I've got the same one for the US, and I think I'm halfway through the States.
So how lucky are you to have supplemented your education with travel, and it makes you a more rounded person.
Yeah. So touching on Robbie's time in South Carolina, obviously he moved to Lander University. I don't think we highlighted the school, but his time at Lander was really successful, right? They were top 5 in the nation at one point, regional champions, all that kind of stuff.
Well, that was he was playing with. I think he was telling me the other day there that one of his players, a French guy, was Mbappe's best mate at Clairefontaine. How bizarre is that?
Yeah.
And his roommate was Kyle Ferguson.
I was going to say, I played with Kyle probably under 15 level after I left Motherwell with yourself, and myself and Kyle nearly went to the same school in New York, and then I didn't go. Kyle committed there. He transferred to Lander and ended up with Robbie. So it just shows you how small a world it is. And now Kyle's obviously back in the professional game at Harrogate Town in England.
I bump into him at the start of the season. Hartlepool play Harrogate.
Oh yeah, you guys beat them, right?
Yeah, we play them in the Papa John's Cup. So
yeah,
you're in the tunnel before the game, and Kyle comes over, and people they don't. Obviously, we're Scottish, but people don't understand. Oh, he stayed with my son for
there's more to it. Yeah,
2 years. Incredible. But some of these kids that Robbie's down meeting in London just now are kids that have come out of the Swedish national team, come out the French, Clairefontaine, two kids from Africa. It was incredible, and that just like you said way back early on in the conversation, that network you've got, because these people, if they've had the ability to get a degree and play football at the same time, are generally not going to end up working in the corner shop.
Fir Park convenience store.
Well, that is a big conglomerate now. That's getting. I think they're talking about buying over Marks and Spencers.
Okay. So just kind of to round off here, a big thing we have is, boys who are coming up to that potential full-time opportunity. Just if you could, I know we've spoke about it briefly here and there, but what would one bit of advice you would give them, if they don't get that contract, to come and explore opportunities in the US?
Exactly what we covered about doing your homework, about understanding the actual place you're going to be, because you don't have the luxury of going out and doing a site visit and then coming back. You're doing a lot of it that we're doing just now. You're doing things on Skype, you're doing things on Zoom. But what you have the ability to do is, because of technology, you can go and look at what the school provides. You can go and look at the alumni of the school. You can go look at the facilities of the school. You can look at the demographics of the town or the city you're going to. And more importantly, and this would be my biggest advice to you guys, if you guys can tie up with alumni and you guys can, whenever you're placing somebody, it's almost like a buddy system. And I know you had that when you went over at the start, when you're a freshman. And that's so important, that you've got somebody that's looking out for you. But the biggest bit of advice I can say is keep your eyes wide open. Don't have that tunnel vision and don't leave it too late.
Yeah.
Very important about the professional status. That is really important. But the biggest thing is about looking at what your career could achieve. It is not a backwater. It is not the way back in the day when I was a young kid at school. My guidance teacher said to me, I think I could have went to Hawaii or somewhere. It was something ridiculous, but never heard of a soccer scholarship before. And it got absolutely poo-pooed. No, I'm going to be a professional. That's it. Now, I think you can make a judgment call about tying up your education with your love and gaining the full experience.
Yeah, no, definitely. And obviously I saw Mackenzie Young come out here, who's now the LSUA head coach. I saw Robbie, and that was kind of what sparked my interest. And look at it now, I've been here since 2017. I started an organisation to help players come out here on my 3-year work visa now, due to my master's degree, which I never thought I would have got. So, I think everything we've covered today gives those potential student athletes a good overview of what life could be in America.
Absolutely. And the testimonials are so important, whether it be from a player's point of view, whether it's from a coach's point of view, or whether it's from a parent's point of view. All these things are so important, that you're going with the full knowledge of what can be delivered, rather than going looking at something that might be there and might not be there. Yeah.
And just to finish on a little fun note here, going back to that network, obviously the Youngs used to have an annual Boxing Day party, correct?
Correct.
I carried that tradition on over here in Scottsdale, and we were out watching Crystal Palace play in Boxing Day, kind of a little bar in town. And this guy sat next to me called Tibor Pele, and Tibor played at UCLA. And I don't know why, but we were talking about coaches in California, and obviously Tibor was at UCLA, so he has a connection there. And your name got brought up, and it was like, oh, that's, me and Gordon have this connection, and Tibor absolutely loves you. So it just, again, going back to that network, how everything's connected, because he loves your seminars. I think he went to a couple at UC Davis. But it's just such a small world.
Well, let me finish with a good story, which you'll like. Same type of vein. I was fortunate to meet Landon Donovan, and Landon Donovan reaches out to me. And again, this is pre-pandemic, so there's a job offer to go to San Diego Loyal as his assistant to start up the academy. Robbie's finishing at Lander, and I'm thinking his mum will be so happy because we can actually do the both here together. So I'd agreed that that's what was going to happen. They were only a brand new club. They'd played one game, and then the USL got sidetracked for a year because of the pandemic. But we still kept the network. And in the summer, I'm out doing a clinic and a coach education symposium. And my best mate out there, David Robertson, as I mentioned earlier, I say to him, look, Landon Donovan asked me to go down and catch up with him because all of our correspondence after we met initially through coach education had been done on the Zoom. So he went, absolutely. We get the flight from Sacramento down to San Diego.
San Diego.
We forget, or I forgot, it was the day Rangers played Frankfurt in the Europa League
Final. I was going to fly out and see you.
Right, yeah, you remember?
Yeah.
So we go down to San Diego. Robbo's a Rangers fan. We get this sports bar. I'm meeting. I'm going to catch up with him at like 2 p.m., 3 p.m. So the game, because of the time difference, is 12 o'clock. So we have a couple of snacks. Robbo has a couple of drinks, and Landon texts me saying, where do you want me to pick you up? And I go, listen, this game's going into extra time. I'll come and pick you up then, tell me where you are. So we're watching the game. It's going into extra time. The place is mobbed. You've got all these Rangers fans. You've got all these Americans. You've got the bar standing and all. Landon Donovan comes in and goes, hey, Gordon. And he starts picking the chicken wings that Robbo's left. And the whole of the bar stops. And that's just the surreal moments in football. Like Captain America comes at the Europa League Final to catch up with me, and we go for a beer.
Yeah, I remember the picture of the book as well.
He never bought it.
He never bought it? Cheapskate.
Cheapskate. Autographed it. He'd probably put it on eBay. That's the style. But wonderful character.
Yeah. Well, Gordon, I appreciate your time today. It's been great giving your insight into, your coaching, Robbie's time in the US, your time in the US. I think, you're a great candidate to get on and kind of talk about your experiences.
Well, anything I can do for you personally or for your company, whether it be a testimonial or giving some experience to any potential athletes, I would certainly do so.
Perfect. Sounds great, Gordon. Have a good one.